Hi there, and welcome back to Model Horses, of course. Today we are going to be talking about a tale of two Western horses. Why? Because they're cool, of course, and also because they're a good example of jargon or terminology that we use in the model horse hobby that not everyone is familiar with. So we like to throw around a lot of terms: glossy, semi-gloss, matte, old mold, new mold, some of which are pretty self-explanatory, others of which might require a little bit of introduction. So I'm going to help you learn to date your Western horses through a few clues that we have on the mold of the horse. Actually, basically today we're just going to talk about their tack and some of the jargon that we use to illustrate this. So on the front, or the front horse, is the classic Palomino Western horse. First horse Breyer ever made, 1950, produced for quite a few years. This particular example is super early in the run, and I will show you why. She also happens to be a chalky. And so super nice, good example of a very early Breyer Western horse. The second horse is the Breyer black and white Pinto Western horse, definitely a little later in the run, made for a very long period of time. This one happens to be a nightlight because that's what I have, because I love nightlights. But even if she wasn't a nightlight, still has lots of clues to tell us that she is earlier in the run than a later black and white Pinto horse. So what are some of these clues? What are some of these things that I'm talking about that help us date the horses? So let's get a little bit closer look. I'm going to be talking about their saddles. So the Breyer Western horse saddle was originally made with a cinch. You can see it hanging down on the Palomino horse, and was made that way for quite a few years, from the original horse in the 1950s all the way up through the late 60s. They had cinches on them before they invented the slip-on or saddle without a cinch. The saddle without a cinch, the slip-on, was much easier to use, didn't break as much because you didn't have that fiddly bit that you had to, the cinch underneath is a bit of a vinyl, very easy to tear, and it snaps, and so it gets torn super easy. This was supposed to be a kid's toy. They would just rip at that snap, rip the cinch off. So many times you will find these saddles with the cinches torn off. Many times you'll find the horses without the saddle itself. But if you should find one with a saddle, we talk about something called high grommets and low grommets. Now, sounds kind of odd, but what we're talking about is that gold circle on the fender. In the Palomino horse, that round circle is up much more towards the seat of the horse, very high on the fender. The black and white horse, that round circle is much lower, and it's kind of in the little flowery bit at the bottom of the fender. That is a grommet. That is where the cinch attached to the saddle. And so the Palomino horse with that high grommet was Breyer's first attempt at making a saddle with a cinch, and thought, hey, let's put it up high on the saddle. It'll be nice and secure up there. Yes, it was nice and secure up there. However, it also tended to scratch the horse because the inside of that grommet is also metal. And so as you took the saddle on and off, it would scratch the paint on the horse underneath. Now, some of the original Western horses can be found with saddle pads made out of kind of this yellowish beige felt, or they can have a little bit of felt attached to that grommet, and that was Breyer's first attempt at trying to fix that problem. And so those are original finish felt saddle pads and grommet covers. Breyer didn't like this concept, probably didn't work super well, and so that's when mid-1950s, say 55, they switched to that low grommet. You can't really see it on the side, but that fender is sticking out away from the horse, so when you take the saddle on and off, that grommet doesn't scratch the paint. So when we say high grommet versus low grommet, we're talking about the saddle, and we're talking about that round metal ring on the saddle that holds the cinch on. High grommets, 1950 to 55, give or take. Low grommets, 55 to mid 60s, 66, 65 era. And then they switch to the saddle without a cinch, the slip-on. And of course, saddles can get moved between horses, but as a general rule, if you're looking to date your Western horse, that's one of your clues. Also, one of the clues is the reins themselves. That Palomino Western horse, you can see very clearly, his reins look like little circles attached to each other. They're basically just a bunch of O-rings attached to each other. That's what we call O-link reins. When we say that, we just mean there are a bunch of O's or circles attached to each other. It's a very early Breyer attempt at making reins. So the very first Western horses had these O-link reins, and that's what we're talking about. That were kind of unknown as to why, but I'm assuming cost and possibly assembly. But about mid-50s, about the time that they started switching up the grommets on the saddles, kind of polishing up the horse a little bit, they switched to what we call chain link reins. So that black and white Western horse has the chain link reins, and it basically just is a necklace where the O's of the O-link reins have been twisted to become a chain, and you can see it lays much flatter over the saddle than those O-link reins that kind of tend to stick up because they're for 90 degrees. Each little O is at a 90 degree from the other O. So the front horse, O-link reins. You can see they're just little O's attached to each other. Black and white Western horse, chain link reins that just look like a necklace chain. So those are some terms that we use to help us identify and date things. So if you hear those terms, hopefully now you will know the difference between a high grommet and a low grommet, and an O-link and a chain link rein. So super early Palomino Western horse with that high grommet O-link, and a little bit later black and white Pinto Western horse with the low grommet chain link reins. Hopefully you found that informative, and I will find something else interesting and esoteric to talk about next time, so join me then. Thank you.